Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first 2023 session of New England Chapter Connects. My name is Tom Modzelewski. I'm a member of the New England American Public Works Association Education Committee. I would like to thank everyone for attending today's session, entry-level driver training, and your organization. We set a goal of 100 attendees, and a few days ago we surpassed that goal of registered attendees, so I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. And it's been just over a year since the FMCSA enacted the final rule of ELDT on February 7th of 2022. And there seem to be quite a few lingering questions regarding the final rule and the regulations within that final rule. So this session is going to focus greatly on answering some of those frequently asked questions, as well as sharing some information that we think may be valuable for you and your organization. Throughout the session, we will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we're going to do our best to get to them. If we don't get to your questions, we will review the chat log after the session is over, and we will send a mass email out to all the attendees regarding the answers to those unanswered questions. Just a couple of things before we get started. First, many thanks to our Public Awareness Committee, the PWAC, and the New England Chapter Education Committee and the subcommittee that put these sessions together. These groups work extremely hard to promote the value and the importance of public works and provide interesting, informative, and timely information and learning opportunities. Also, a big shout out to our New England Chapter Connects producer, Regina Hackett, who you just saw, and the entire team at the Connecticut T2 Center. They do an amazing job at producing our New England Chapter Connects program. And of course, special thanks to our APWA New England chapter sponsors. Without the support of our sponsors, we cannot bring all the valuable programs and events to our members and the public works community. The New England Chapter Connects program was created to keep us all connected and informed while we were going through COVID. So we hope that you'll find this series worthwhile and informative as we continue to stay connected. Please help us help you by completing the short survey at the very end of the session. There'll be a QR code that you can scan with your smartphone and answer a few questions that will help us make new sessions in the future and evaluate the current sessions as well. Also, if you miss a session or two and you would like to review them, they're all available to you on the New England Chapter website. It's sometimes it's a good thing to host a little lunch and learn with your staff and play a session that either you might have missed or you thought was worthwhile to replay. So without further ado, let me introduce our panel for today. As I said, I'm Tom Modzelewski. I'm the Superintendent of Operations for the town of Ellington, Connecticut. We have Edward Brickner. Edward is a state program specialist for the Connecticut division of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the FMCSA. And being directly involved with the federal agency that created the rule, Edward can help answer any regulatory questions. We have Mitch Soriano. Mitch is the campus director for the New England Tractor Trailer Training School. As a training provider, Mitch will be able to help guide us through the ins and outs of the educational and hands-on aspects of ELDT training. We have Mike DeMars, who works with Mitch. Mike is the regional director of training at the New England Tractor Trailer Training School. And along with Mitch, Mike will help answer those educational questions. And then to wrap it up, we've got Nathan Mears. Nate is the director of public works in Stratham, New Hampshire. And Stratham has implemented a successful in-house ELDT training program. So we look forward to hearing about the process that he went through implementing that and sharing it with his staff. So welcome to the panel. Thank you for taking the time to join our discussion today. And I'd like to start with Edward Brickner, who will begin with a short PowerPoint presentation. So it's all yours, Ed.
All right, thank you. All right, can you see that?
Yep, you're all set.
Okay, great. So I'll try to go through this quickly because I know there's going to be a lot of questions. So entry-level driver training. And all right, I cannot scroll the screen. there we go. All right. So the entry-level driver training final rule, a little background on it. This was not something that FMCSA just thought up. We get our authorization to spend money through Congress, and I believe it was 2013, Congress said that we needed to institute an entry-level driver training rule. So we did a notice of proposed rulemaking, I believe in 2013. Final rule came out in 2016, and the compliance date was February 7th, 2022. So part of it is the training registry provider, which is an FMCSA owned website that lists all training providers eligible to provide entry-level driver training and retains records of drivers that have successfully completed the entry-level driver training program. So a CDL applicant will go on to the training provider registry, find a certified, self-certified training provider in their area. They would contact that person and set up the training. Once that training is completed, the training provider is required to submit the driver training certification to FMCSA, and then we in turn post that to the state driving license agency. So prior to administering the skills test or knowledge test, the state has to go on the training provider registry to make sure that the driver has completed the required training. Okay, so there's a few standards that we've included for Class A or Class B commercial driver's licenses who are being licensed for the first time. We'll get to that in a little while. If you previously held a license and had it downgraded, then you don't need to do entry-level driver training, provided you held that license prior to February 7th, 2022. If you want an upgrade to a Class B from an existing Class A, sorry, I got that backwards, an upgrade to a Class A from an existing Class B, then you have to do the entry-level driver training. And if you want either a hazardous materials, passenger, or school bus endorsement, you have to have the entry-level driver training. Does not include drivers who have been waived from CDS skills testing under Part 383 of 49 Code of Federal Regulations. And those people may be people with prior military experience who haven't held the CDL but have operated a commercial motor vehicle, or there's certain farm exemptions where CDLs aren't required. So the entry-level drivers must complete the applicable training. Training must be completed prior to taking a CDL skills test, or if applying for the hazmat endorsement, prior to taking the knowledge test, because there is no skills test required for hazmat endorsement. It's only a knowledge test. And whether or not a driver is subject to entry-level driver training is determined by when they obtained their commercial learner's permit. Again, February 7th, 2022. I believe in every state at this point, if you receive, if you hold a commercial learner's permit at this point in time, you're required to have entry-level driver training before you can get that CDL issued. We won't talk about this because we're past that window. So after February 7th, 2022, drivers who obtain a commercial learner's permit are required to have entry-level driver training. Drivers who apply for school bus passenger hazmat endorsement must have the training. So there's three components to the training. Theory and behind the wheel. So there's the theory component, then there's behind the wheel range, which is on a closed course where drivers will practice maneuvers. And then there's on the road. And they must complete each portion within 1 year of each other. Public road. So it does not allow for test outs. So no matter how you do in the entry-level driver training, you still have to take a road test. So training providers can include training schools, educational institutions, basically unions, local and state governments, school districts, owners, operators, and individuals, which we don't see very often. It's going to be hard for them to comply, but they can do it. So to be authorized to be an entry-level driver training provider, you have to register with FMCSA and self-certify that you meet all the applicable federal and state requirements. And providers are required to register even if they don't provide training to the general public. So once we get to the question and answers, a lot of this will be cleared up. But to just read this off the slide, it's a little awkward. So the curriculum, there's a curriculum for all of these, the three that I talked about, the Class A, the Class B, and the endorsements. Trying to get through this quickly, I apologize. So who can be a trainer? Anyone who's a trainer has to have at least 2 years experience driving a commercial motor vehicle requiring a CDL of the same or higher class for the same endorsement, or 2 years as a behind the wheel CMV instructor. So there's one exception to that. If it's only behind the wheel range and the drivers aren't going out on the road, then it can be someone who previously held a license of that class or higher, but may not currently hold it. So they can hold it at the time, or they could have held it for 2 years in the past. They can still do the range training, but they can't obviously do the on-road training if they don't hold the current CDL. So when we talked about complying with state regulations in Connecticut, I can only speak about, there's the Department of Higher Education. And if you're providing training to the public, then you have to meet the requirements of the Office of Higher Education. Currently, I shouldn't say currently, but the last time I checked, which was several months ago, there was only a handful of companies that met that. If you do not offer training to the public, you only offer training to your union members or your employees, then you don't have to meet those requirements, but it has to specifically be that you're only providing it to the people who are your employees or your members. You can't provide it just to the general public. Vehicles have to comply with all the safety standards, have to be the same type and group that the driver's going to be tested for in the skills test. Theory training, they have to use assessments, basically tests. There's no specification on what those tests must include. They just have to, if you're a training provider, you have to give the students tests and they have to earn an overall score of 80. Behind the wheel training, there's no set number of hours. You just have to meet all the requirements in the curriculum. So the thing is, if you're thinking about becoming a training provider, you're certifying that these students have met those requirements. You're certifying that they're properly trained. They've had the behind the wheel training. You're giving them tests that are not just a cursory test, it's an actual test to test their knowledge of the required information, and that they can operate on the road safely and do all the skills needed for the test. So if you become a training provider, your self-certification, you're certifying that these drivers meet those requirements. Paperwork that's required after someone is trained. Driver training name, date of birth, CDL class, specs about the specific type of training, score on the assessments, written number of clock hours. Even though there's no specified amount required, FMCSA is keeping track of it to try to find a baseline, to, I guess, identify best practices, and date of successful completion. So that information can be uploaded directly to the training provider website. If you have a large number of students, there's also a way that you can set it up to do batches. So you can just hit the button and it'll transfer through your IT system. You have to maintain all the records for 3 years. So as I said, manual submission or through web services, which would require you to have an interface with the TRP website, Training Registry Provider website. Yeah, so that's, unfortunately, we went through that pretty quickly. This was PowerPoint that was set up from a while ago, so I skipped over some parts that weren't important anymore. There's the website for the training provider registry team and the website. There's my link if you have specific questions later that aren't answered today. So as we go through, I would be happy to answer any questions. Primarily my oversight on the entry-level driver training is through the State Driver License Association to make sure that they're actually checking. They're making sure that they're doing their part, but I am familiar with most of the rest of it. So if there's any questions I can answer, I don't know if you want to do those now or at the end.
Yeah, so nothing too crazy came up in the chat as of yet. Just a couple folks asking for these PowerPoint presentations, and just to let everybody know, if you didn't see it in the chat, we will be sending the PowerPoints out to all registered attendees, so you can review them at your leisure. I don't see anything else coming in the chat. I did have a question for you, Ed, that I'd been asked before. Is there any liability placed, like from a legal standpoint, on the trainer, the person who self-certifies to be the trainer?
There could be. It wouldn't be through us. You know, what we would do is if there was an issue where we saw people who weren't being properly trained, there was a high failure rate of people coming from a specific trainer, or there was complaints from students that they weren't being trained properly to the full curriculum, then we may investigate that. And from our standpoint, the worst case scenario is the training provider will be decertified, and all those people will have to, who are trained under that provider during whatever time frame is specified that there was a problem, those people would all have to be retrained before their license would be suspended or revoked, and they would have to be retrained until they could pass the test after the proper training.
Okay. Just had a couple questions pop up. One regarding.
I was just going to say, just to continue on that, there could be liability on the other end, where if that came to light after a crash, that would be, you know, significant liability on that trainer, I would think.
Okay.
It wouldn't be from FMCSA.
Thank you for that clarification. The first question I had is, there's no training for the trainers. Will there be more in-depth training for the trainer?
Not that I'm aware of, no. There's no plan
Okay.
for that.
Sorry about that, Daryl. No future prospects of training for the trainers. APWA Workforce Development is asking if there's a link where the folks can find the FMCSA program managers in their state.
By program managers, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
I'm gonna assume that he says there's a place for defined assessment, so that's a separate question. So like you're on the Connecticut FMCSA, is there a website that where you could find your local or state representative for the FMCSA in your area?
Yeah, if you go to the FMCSA website, fmcsa.dot.gov, there should be a link that may say contact us or who we are, which would have a breakdown of all the divisions in every state. So we do have a division office, at least one division office in every state, where you could get information on that. There's probably a listing for the division administrator, would be the highest official in that state, and they would be able to direct you in the right direction.
Okay, perfect. I have another question here. Can a town employee use online training vendors for theory, then complete the behind the wheel training for certified town trainer?
And I did pop that FMCA contact us link in the chat too. So if someone wants to grab that, it's there.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, online training is fine. It doesn't matter where that training is. It doesn't have to be the same as the behind the wheel training provider. They could be different providers. The only thing that has to be the same is the behind the wheel training providers, and the behind the wheel road and behind the wheel range has to be the same training provider. And those two components have to be completed within a year of each other. So yes, online theory is fine.
Okay. Mitch, you want to unmute yourself? I think I've got a couple questions that you might be pretty helpful with this one from Daryl. The manual is very unclear on items. The order of the circle check is poor, and we had to adjust it to make it run more smoothly. Is there any talks of an updated manual? Also, the maneuvers don't specify the size of the parallel park space, lane change, distance, or pull up or reverse. So basically, is there any talk of updating some of the requirements for the actual testing site or specifications?
Mike, I think you might be better off with that, but I know that here in Connecticut that the range does have specific, the state does have specific requirements on how it's set up, the width between the cones, how the distance between the boxes for like parallel parking. So each state has their specific requirements, and best thing to do would be to contact the Department of Transportation to get those requirements.
And Tom, if I can add on to that.
Yeah, absolutely, Ed.
Yeah, so it would be the Department of Motor Vehicles who does the skills testing, and what they use is the AMVA 2017 model for the range. AMVA is American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. I believe that the CDL driver's manual, either available through AMVA or available through the DMV website, at least here in Connecticut, has specifications on the size of that range.
Okay, great. Somebody asked, APWA Workforce Development asked, is there a place to find the templates for the assessments? Ed, do you have any knowledge of that? I know Clear Roads offers a really thorough curriculum and everything like that. And I think Nate is going to talk about that here in a little while. I believe I did see that they had checklists and stuff like that that they supplied as you're going through all the different types of training. So I would consider those the assessments. Ed, any further knowledge on that?
Well, FMCSA didn't specifically provide any templates for that, and it's left up to the training provider to determine what they think is appropriate.
Okay. One more came in. Are the training requirements and manuals, training literature available on the FMCSA website?
I believe it is. I think the website is trp.fmcsa.gov. I may be mistaken though, but if you go to the FMCSA website and search for training provider registry or entry-level driver training, you should find that information.
Okay. One more question here before we move on to our next PowerPoint. If a trainee has a Class B and can operate a standard transmission and wants to upgrade to a Class A, but the Class A vehicle that they're going to take the test with has a automatic, will they then be restricted to an automatic only vehicle?
No, that's a great question that comes up a lot. And the answer in Connecticut, I can say for sure, is no. If they've passed any CDL road test with a manual transmission and take any other road test with an automatic, they will not get the automatic restriction.
Awesome.
That's my understanding. Whether that happens in practice, someone else could probably better inform you on that, but that's the way it's supposed to work.
Great, thanks, Ed. Daryl, those are great questions. Really appreciate it. That's one in particular I hadn't given any thought to, so that was awesome. So the chat's pretty quiet right now. Why don't we get into Nate's presentation? Nate from Stratham, New Hampshire has created an in-house program that he does within his DPW and has been successful with it. So Nate, if you want to share your screen and talk a little bit about what you experienced when you were creating your program, that'd be pretty beneficial, I think.
Unmute.
Mute.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nate Mears. I'm the Director of Public Works for a small organization located in the town of Stratham, New Hampshire. So to get right into it, I think everybody was in the same boat. February 7th was lingering, and a lot of folks in the municipal world had concerns of how is this going to, how are these new regulations going to impact our operations? The FMCSA's implementing of the regulated ELDT training took many by surprise in 2022. Unfortunately, unless you were a current commercial driver's license holder or an active member of the commercial trucking industry, you likely had little insight to the pending changes in advance. Just as we were all battling staffing challenges in the national pandemic, our organizations were up against a hurdle of navigating entry-level driver training. Just to piggyback on Ed's presentation, laid out here are the chronicles of the ELD training itself. Few know that the ELDT training was first mandated by Congress back in 2012. However, state and federal rulemaking processes, along with technical deficiencies on a state level, caused successive years of delay. While the task of registering with the FMCSA as a training provider may initially seem daunting, the process is fairly straightforward. The FMCSA now offers several informative videos on the training provider registry webpage. These informative videos will offer the steps required to self-certify and the necessary requirements. Some questions that came to mind as I tackled this was immediately, do I certify as a public or non-public provider? As a municipality, you will register as a non-public provider. Another question might be, for some, does the FMCSA charge a fee when registering as a provider? No, fees are not charged to the provider for registration. Like most municipalities, I am facing attrition. Senior staff are retiring, opening a void that is proving to be difficult in the current job market to fill. Restaffing with green employees is currently the situation that we are in. The talent pool with experience and desire to perform the work that DPW conducts is very limited. Green employees are not coming with a CDL, and so we are offering that training within. I chose to utilize the materials provided free of charge from Clear Roads, a wonderful organization that has developed training tools specifically for municipal public works departments. The Clear Roads materials are intuitive and come in the form of a PowerPoint file, which you can use to train staff internally. I was able to connect with the green staff using the Clear Roads training tools, similar to the historic tried and true method of the new guy training with the DPW mechanic or the senior staffer that we've often done in our organizations in the past. I chose this approach because I was hearing from colleagues that they were experiencing a disconnect with the use of software for the theory portion of the training. I was hearing that new employees were repeatedly failing the software training and taking months to get through with a passing score. My question was this because of a disconnect with the software and the trainee and the use of it for that theory portion? Or was it because the new employee would rather be behind the computer instead of learning how to jet a sewer main? I can tell you, as a new employee coming into a DPW, realizing what we do, there's probably some organizations that have seen that occur where the new employee would rather be in an office scenario. And so I chose to train using the Clear Roads materials because it maintained a direct connection with the green employee and myself, holding the goal of obtaining a CDL high. So to date, through this method, we hold a 100% success rate. I've utilizing all of Clear Roads materials. We've successfully maintained a 100% success rate over the last year and a half, and not seeing a major challenge. We haven't experienced the lag in time. I've been able to manage the progress with the employees directly, not having that disconnect by putting them in front of a computer, utilizing the software for the theory training. So as a non-public provider, I'm able to successfully take new employees through all three phases of the training, through theory, through the behind the wheel range portion right here locally at our facility, and then through the over the road training. So I would open up to any questions. If there's anyone out there that has any questions regarding my approach, I think this method can be utilized both in a small organization like Stratum, as well as larger organizations. I know there's some cities that are neighboring our location here, and they have the opportunity to actually invest in the softwares, buying into softwares, as well as assigning a staff member as a training officer. Our size of our organization, I didn't have that luxury, so I by default am the training officer. But I think because I came from the field, I had many years of service in the field, and evolved into a director. I had a strong understanding of the best approach that would equal success for us. Now kick it back to you, Tom.
Thanks a lot, Nate. I appreciate it. I got a question from Eric Slazek. Do you offer stipends or pay differentials for your trainers? And I can talk to that a little bit too. I registered as a training provider for a convenience factor, but I guess fortunately for me, I haven't actually had to do any of the training yet. Everybody we've onboarded came in with a CDL. But Nate, did you receive a stipend or anything like that for becoming a training provider, registering yourself with the FMCSA?
No stipends here. I mean, I'm out there in the field daily with the crew. I work for a salary, and oftentimes, I'm out there plowing. So no form of a stipend as a training officer. My biggest goal is to staff up so that I have more time to perform my admin duties. So I have more focus on making that work rather than worrying about a stipend. But in a larger organization, I can understand, obviously, if you're in a larger organization where you have a dedicated team of training officers, I would imagine that would be an opportunity there.
Ed or Eric, does that kind of answer your question? I hope. I see you followed up with a stipend for the employed trainer, but sounds like Nate is the employed trainer. So I think his answer is no, he doesn't receive anything. But if there's anybody else,
I'll send you my address.
yeah, if there's anybody else on here that is implemented a program and does receive a stipend, feel free to drop that in the chat if you're so inclined. Eric also asked, do the training hours you mentioned include the individual online training, or is this amount of time your trainer spends training the new driver? How are you breaking down those hours of training, Nate?
So hours of training, again, you mentioned earlier in the presentation, the Clear Roads materials is very very intuitive, and it does outline what your expectations for hours are. So I utilized their platform as well as the assessments following each training module, and you can expect to have right around 70 hours of theory training invested. And then to piggyback on Ed's discussion, there is no specified hours for the behind the wheel, but you can expect to likely have, I invested 40 hours into range, 40 hours into behind the wheel before I felt confident knowing that we were going to hit the road, take our new employee to the DMV here in New Hampshire and walk away, have them drive away with a license.
Thank you, Nate. Mitch or Mike from Nets, is that about what you guys are seeing from an ELDT perspective, getting somebody through that aspect of the training? Are you seeing that type of time frame?
I'll get this one, Mitch. This was pretty seamless for us at New England Tractor Trailer. We already had a 600-hour curriculum. So our hours and stuff never changed. Our students will spend 260 hours on the field, and they'll get somewhere between 25 and 30 hours of behind the wheel on the public road before we let them see the state inspector. So there's no real requirements, but the curriculum is pretty much almost laid out for people. But you should understand that we test in 6 different states, and not one of those states is the same. So you should really check if you have questions. The earlier one about upgrading from automatic to, a stick to automatic to a stick. You need to check with your local DMV or RMV, whatever's in your state, because they are quite different in some cases. It's pretty much the competency behind the curriculum that the feds have laid out. The field training, which obviously should include some things required for the state exam, and then stuff that they're going to have to do out in real world. They should be prepared for that. That's where a lot of our road training comes to play. But it's been pretty seamless for us. We just keep moving along right now. We've had several national accounts who came to us to guide them in building their own programs and decided it was just cheaper to have us train their people for them, so that's been helpful for us in the recent history. But they laid out for you, and the FMCSA Fieldhouse, their regional headquarters in your area, and the RMV is your best resource for any questions that you might be hung up on.
Mike or Mitch as well, did you guys have to implement anything new at NETS for ELDT, or it just ended up being part of your normal curriculum?
I don't think we implemented anything new. We just had to rearrange some of our curriculum for one state's liking, but nothing new.
Okay, great. And
Tom,
I'm
can I
not
add
quite,
something there?
yeah, of course, Ed.
To go with what Mike said, yeah, you should not be training just to the test. You know, you should be training to try to make competent drivers. So, you know, I don't know what the time frame is, but that's one thing I wanted to point out. And then something else that maybe wasn't clear: only one person needs to register as a training provider. That could be anyone in your department or agency, and then other people can be instructors without registering. So I just wanted to add that. And the curriculum is located in the appendices of Part 380 of 49 CFR.
Thank you very much. Ed, while I got you, there was a question that I received a couple days ago. Are there any existing, or do you know of any potential federal grants that would be coming our way to the municipalities or even to the private sector that would help fund this ELDT training mandate?
Well, we don't have anything that would fund providing the training. We do have some grants that we provide to training schools. And I believe those schools would have to be open to the public, but I would have to double check on that to make sure. And those are basically grants where we would pay for the training of veterans, their immediate family members, and possibly members of underserved communities. So there is something out there for people to get their licenses, but I'm not aware of anything that would fund the training school directly to to build a program and provide that training.
Great, thank you very much. And maybe Nate, since you've experienced implementing your own program, are there any costs that you've incurred associated with implementing an in-house ELDT training program?
No, really, the process came with very little cost. I did have printouts produced, but all in all, on a small scale, it's very economical to utilize the training materials from Clear Roads. I would just like to go back to that question Daryl had asked regarding the, I believe it was Daryl, regarding the layout. And again, you're going to want to refer to your local RMV or DMV. Up here in New Hampshire, we have a Department of Motor Vehicles, and there is a supplement, and I believe that came out in 2022. There's a supplement providing the scaled drawing for the range layout and everything. So each, I think Ed probably noted this, each local state DMV or RMV should be able to offer you that in hand. You should be able to walk into a DMV and walk out with a hard copy of that. I've seen a couple chats pop up saying that various RMVs and DMV websites are difficult to utilize. I'd echo that. You're not wrong. They are. And that goes back to the deficiencies that each state had leading up to that. And that's the reason why this has taken so long to roll out. So if in doubt, pay your local RMV or DMV office a visit and try to obtain the hard copies with them. Another great resource here in New Hampshire, we have New Hampshire State Police Troop G oversees the actual road examinations, and I've directly called with questions and had officers supply me with the answers that I could not obtain through the DMV staff. So they're a great resource. Reach out to your state police locally. you will find somewhere within their website, their organization, there typically is somebody overseeing the DMV's operations through the state police. And additionally, one item that I learned through our process here in New Hampshire, we were testing for the road examinations leading up real close to our winter operations. So I'm gearing up our plow trucks with plows, wings, sanders, all of the items that you don't necessarily want to have tagging along when you're doing a road examination. I did learn we didn't utilize it. We were able to maneuver around the situation, but I did learn that New Hampshire State Police, state troopers do offer the opportunity to contract. You pay a detail fee, and they will send a state police officer that is trained to offer and take a new driver through the road course right here locally. So they will, here in New Hampshire, it's not a well-known fact, but they will come directly to your facility and offer a examination. We struggled with meeting the schedules that were required through DMV. DMV here in New Hampshire does no longer utilize state police for the actual examination unless you request it. They have contracted officers that are contracted and qualified to perform the road examinations. And there was some struggles through that. There were actual training officers on site that were not concurring with their decision on the abilities of the driver. So we actually stood on site. I was standing back. I had employees that were actually one contracted examiner was saying, "Hey, you passed your pre-trip," and the other individual standing right next to that officer was saying, "Nope, he failed this, he failed this." So long and the short, if you experience those similar situations in your local states, please reach out to your local resources with state police. Ed, I'm sure you can offer some better resources as well through FMCSA. Thank you.
Can I just bring something up here, Tom?
Yep, go ahead, Ed.
So I'm gonna put this link in the chat and hopefully I can make this work. This is a link to Connecticut's CDL driver manual. And let me try to share this real quick. I know we're running short on time here. I apologize. Okay, here we go. I'm sorry. So this is what's in the manual towards the end of it. Let me see if I can get there and scroll it. No. Okay, sorry. Can you still see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
And we put the link in the chat.
Okay, I'm looking at something different here, but anyway, that has the maneuvers that are on the road test, and if I can get back there, I'm just totally lost here. It should also have the size of the course that's required.
Okay.
So I apologize.
Thanks, Ed.
Hey,
Yep.
So I had a question come up from Marshfield DPW, probably for Nate. Is your training done during the workday or after hours? And are the employees compensated for the after hours? And I know from what we've done in the past here in Ellington, we did some training during the day, during normal work hours, and they were compensated as if they were outperforming a normal function. And anything overtime related was not compensated. It was a volunteer basis. I, as the trainer, was volunteering my time, and the benefit to the employee was that they were obtaining their CDL through the town. So we did not compensate the employee for overtime. Nate, anything different on your end?
Yeah, that was definitely a question and concern that I battled with. Ultimately, through the attrition, gentlemen are literally retiring, walking out of the door, leaving me empty nested. I need to restaff. We're going to pay these guys. I'm not going to take somebody off the street with zero experience and expect them to report every day, stay late, and not get compensated. This was an investment that the town knew we needed to make in order to create a sustainable DPW that we didn't already have in place. We relied for many years on senior staffers, and there wasn't a lot of turnover for decades, and all of a sudden it all came at once. So unfortunately, from an administrative standpoint, we put ourselves in that position. We realized, hey, this isn't sustainable. We gotta immediately start investing in restaffing, and that's what we did. We maintained all the training in-house during working hours, and all employees were compensated for their straight pay during those working hours.
Great. Another question probably for Nate and really the group as a whole, like everybody on the call today. Do any of the agencies on the webinar today have an agreement the employee must sign so they don't leave the day after they get their CDL after you've invested in them? And that's definitely a good conversation to have. I know here in Ellington, we don't have anything that says, you owe us 3 years or you owe us 4 months or whatever it is. And Nate, I think from our conversation the other day, you hadn't implemented anything as of yet, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we do not have any policy in place. I did go through that exact experience, losing a brand new employee immediately following they obtained their CDL on a Thursday and quit Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
So it is a very real situation. It's one of those situations that there is no good answer. As a municipality, it's quite difficult to recoup any of those expenses. Fortunately, the process that we've taken, our expenses are pretty low, other than the investment with wages. We haven't bought into software or any of that, so it's a gamble, and we've seen how it can go, but we still I do not have any policy supported by our town administration that's in effect. I know I did research it. Most police organizations and fire organizations will require new candidates to sign a agreement, whether it's duration of service or recouping the cost for the cost of sending them to an academy and buying in the safety materials for them to be successful. I know that's definitely something that occurs in all of those organizations, and they have that policy in place for a reason. I'm unable right now at this point to move in that direction.
Okay. Thanks. I see, just to follow up on that, Nicholas Schwartz says that he's got an agreement saying that the employee has to stay for 3 years after training. So definitely some folks out there doing it. David Penasalt says in Lexington, if an employee leaves within 2 years, they must reimburse the town for all training and licenses. It's in their union contract. So I see Regina put up the QR code. That's the giant hook pulling me off the stage here. If you all wouldn't mind scanning that code and filling out a really short survey, it would greatly help us, not only with this session, but future sessions, because you can tell us what you would like to see in the future. If there's any unanswered chats or questions in the chat, we will answer those and provide them to you in a future email, along with the PowerPoint presentations that were shared with you today. I guess that's kind of it from my end. Regina, you have any closing comments?
I'm sorry, I just can't find where my camera is. So I also put the link to the evaluation, the direct link into the chat box as well. And then we do have coming up on April 27th, we have another one of our chapter connects, and it's a facilities and grounds hot topics. I'm putting that link for registration in the chat box as well, and just want to let everyone know as well, we have May 25th, electrification of municipal public works fleets and equipment. And I am going to put that in the chat box right now as well. And I am going to, there we go. And that should be it.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Special shout out to the APWA Workforce and Development Committee. I see you sitting there in the background. Hi, Donna. And thanks for jumping in on the call. Good to see everybody. Thanks for the great attendance numbers. It was a good session and very informative. If anybody has any questions, feel free to email any one of us that was on the panel today, or follow up with the email that we send out in the future regarding the unanswered questions and PowerPoints. Thanks, everybody. Hope to see you on the 27th of April. Take care.
Bye, everyone.